Okay, so today's video is going to be something a little bit different. So we're going to be using the single stage Lee press. If you're going to get one, I recommend the Challenger, which has this O design here. The C press that they have, I've actually ripped clean off a bench. So today we're going to be reloading for 45 ACP. So 45 ACP, pretty common handgun caliber. Here on the manual, you can see for ACP it has all of the basic things. So the 898 is actually going to be a maximum length. The shell can be shorter. And then for this, it actually has a bunch of the powders we're using. One of the big considerations is you'll notice that it lists a bullet weight and then a description. We're going to be over here using the 230 grain jacketed bullets. So for 230 jacket, we've got the Winchester 244 is what we're going to be using today. You can see that it tells you the different measurements for what they recommend. So if you're doing by weight, it's grains, volume. You could do auto disc or the dippers. For our Winchester 244, we're going to use 5.1. It's important not to start at the maximum load because this is the number of you should never go above this. So we're going to start at 5.1 and we're going to work up in 0.1 increments until we get to the maximum load of 5.6. That's going to tell us what our best load is going to be.
Pop it in there.
And when we test them, we'll figure out which one we're going to use.
Don't go all the way to
so
the bottom.
So today we're just going to be doing small batches for testing. So part here of I actually this have process the Lee manual.
Depriming generally takes a second.
And then here it actually lists all of our dimensions for the cases. So if there was any question that we needed to measure,
one thing to note, most people just throw away primers.
And it'll tell us
the tube that's on the press.
So because
you could literally
when
just
you
route
buy
to a trash can
your dice
if you so chose,
it will actually come with that piece of paper.
I generally keep some.
So it
primers,
has all of the numbers we need.
But you have 4 sizes of primer. 6 if you really want to get complicated. You've got small prime,
and then I have
small pistol, large pistol,
this little tray
small
here,
rifle,
full
large
of rounds,
rifle,
and we are going to be
pistol
using these. We're not going to use all of them.
So the main difference with them is that a large pistol,
essentially
and a large
4
rifle,
steps,
and small pistol,
arguably
and small rifle
4 to 6
are same
steps,
sizes,
depending what you're doing.
So they're not
for us
any different.
We've got
like
the D prime to knock the primer out and
matters
out
what's
the case.
inside of them.
The rifle here we have
cartridges
our
are generally,
powder
a little bit faster, a little more powerful,
directly into our shell.
so the primers match that.
Here you have your bullet seating die
is
for
slower,
how far
colder.
down it pushes the bullet.
You don't,
and then here
so you need
we
it
have
to burn
our
faster, but
die.
you don't need as much power.
So this is going to make sure that
so your press will only come with
our bullet doesn't come out.
Primer inserter
so
tools.
if you would like to measure
a large
by
and a
volume
small,
instead of weight,
that's
what this little dipper is here for.
Now, I'm not aware of any cartridges that
a
explicitly
0.7
call for
cc
Magnum
dipper,
primers.
so you use that information.
And in most cases,
you could
if you
use
get
this.
Magnum anything,
I prefer to use
you're just
weight.
wasting your money because it's
and
just
then
a
when you
name,
buy this kit,
no
it comes with the shell holder to actually
but
hold the shell in the case.
Some people I'm aware do use them.
So we're going to start by priming and
Winchester
sizing
large pistol primers.
We're going to trim our case
was at the
lengths,
store when I went there,
and then I'm going to put them in a tumbler to clean them.
It is
so that they look pretty.
important that you only use the same primer every time. If you have large pistol, or if you use Winchester large pistol, then and you work up a load, you should only ever use Winchester large pistol.
This is your
you shouldn't change to the Winchester Magnums. You shouldn't change
it
to
sits
CCI.
inside a hollow in the
You
ram
should
here.
be brand loyal.
And then you throw it on the floor to check its integrity.
And if for some reason, like they're not available, then start over.
So this edge here is a deflector.
We're going down to the starting
and you
load,
leave that out
and we're
because
going
you're not
up
putting
towards the
primers back in.
maximum.
They'll actually bounce
And
out
as
the
we're
side and end up
walking
on the
towards
floor.
that target,
So
then we're looking
have to
for
have that
the
in when
best
you're
rounds.
depriming as well. And then you can put
Now,
your shell holder
because we're
here in
talking
the
about
top.
half a grain difference between
I like to
the
put it to the
maximum
left
and
here,
the minimum.
so I'm,
There's not really
taking
going to
them
be
in and
any
out with my left hand and
savings in
operating the
powder or
press with
anything
my
like
right.
that. But
That's
if for
personal
some
preference
reason,
there.
you know, like 5.1 grains doesn't cycle the
So
weapon,
I
you need more
actually
powder.
take the
But
5.6
these quick change bushings
bushings
could be
that they
too
have are really
powerful.
convenient.
And
But the ones that come with your
the gun
dies are made out of
probably
aluminum.
won't blow up
When I'm
until you get
resizing,
really
I
high
do
above
not.
that.
I use the steel one that
But
came with the
you
press.
should never exceed that number because it's a safety thing.
Reloading, especially 5.56,
If you ever are on like
it has
reloading groups or
been
gun groups or
stuck
something like
enough
that, and you hear about
that it
Bubba's
literally
pissing hot
ripped the
reloads,
threads out.
then they mean
that was a
somebody
really
who
bad
has
day.
made their own ammunition, and rather than
So
work up a
later I
load,
might use that. I
they've
may
just
not.
like started at the
I have a collection of
maximum
them somewhere.
or they've picked a number.
So we raise
They're
all the way
far
up to the top,
out exceeding
screw
what they
in
should be doing,
until it stops.
which is a good way to blow up a gun. And I don't know about y'all, hand grenades are really fucking cool. Not A, when they're
Now,
right next to my
back
face, and B, when
having
I'm
two
holding
of these
them.
trays is really nice, and you've got the two different
Some, you know.
sizes, and they all have shoulders in them, so that
Maybe
your
I'm
bullets
just a
don't
picky
fall into
bitch. It
them.
wouldn't be the first time someone's accused
With
me
this
of that.
specific brand, it actually on the bottom side has them as well. So at the 45 ACP, it's too big
I
for your
figured
small
I would
holes,
share
but
that,
it'll fall
'cause
into
this
your
is
big
going a
holes.
lot faster than I
So you
thought it
actually
was.
use the indentions on the bottom to hold your cases. Having two of these
I went
saves
ahead
you a
and
lot of
finished
effort.
lubing the cases. You can actually mix the Lee lube with some water to thin
the
it
first
out.
thing we're gonna do is
And
size
I
them.
mean, if you're doing like rifles, you
Now
need
you
to
take
lube inside
a
the
little
neck
bit
as
of
well.
some kind of lube.
So it's not a. That's
a
why I
lot
have
of people
Q-tips
use
over
spray
here.
lube for their
Is
cases.
the
I don't
Q-tips
really
are
like
for lubing the inside of
So
rifle
you need it
cartridges.
together.
For pistols, I don't really find
Open
that
her
to
up.
be a problem. At least not anywhere near as much.
Get a little bit on your finger because it is essentially beeswax. It's non-toxic. And then just as we go, rub a little bit of this on the top edge. Getting a little bit inside there is not going to hurt anything.
Put it in. Well, you raise it up so that you're. If you go all the way to the bottom, that primer press, it gets in the way. So now you can go all the way up. Most reloading
pushes
doesn't
the primer
require
out.
an awesome amount of force.
And it resizes the case.
The only one that I find
Already
gets
it looks
stuck
cleaner.
and can be a royal bitch
But
to
the
do
big thing is you see
is
the
going
primers
to be
out.
5.56 rounds.
This is the reason I like
I don't
to
know why they
deprime
just
them
are.
before I put them into the tumblers to clean up that primer pocket. So now out of laziness, we can just throw it upside down. Roll a little onto our next one. And keep going.
So I realized.
Okay. So
One thing
hopefully
I
this
kind of
is
forgot to
at least
mention
where
was
it
as
can
you're
be seen
doing
a little
this, so
better. You rub that on there, and you're looking for any splitting, cracking, any reason it would be dangerous to use.
And the reason for this collet and pin here is if the pin gets bent or the primer's stuck or something like that, it'll push this pin out of the way and push it up. And you can see all that extra lube in there, so you know that it was okay to do a couple of them dry. So now we'll do what's called the zip trim. So this whole thing, this is probably one of those that I could get away with using the quick change. But you screw that all the way to the bottom. That's on a bearing, so it moves. Now, this is the basic bitch trimmer. It doesn't chamfer and deburr and all that. That goes in there and should spin freely. This is an adjustment piece here, so it moves 6 clicks. It should move 6/1000ths of an inch. So when we get dial calipers, zero them out. We can check what our case is. 0.885.
if you'll remember, maximum length was 0.898. So we are well over that, or well under. But you know what? I'm a picky bitch. Let's say I wanted to trim these down to 0.88 even. So we got our little brass catcher tray here. It slides over so that we're not making a huge mess. Throw your shell in. Find the nice medium between doing this and hitting the camera. And now we can just turn this. And just turn it till it free spins. You don't need to push super, super hard. We can now take our case out and recheck. So we didn't cut anything off. We'll give this 2 clicks. Put it back in. And recheck. We might go to 0.885. So I'll give that one more click. Throw it back in. And I find stretching is a much bigger problem on rifles than it is pistols, but you still want to check your cases because nobody wants to load 50 rounds and find out that none of them will chamber. So now we can recheck that. 0.885, I am happy with that. Now, this is a deburring die, so if there's any sharp edges from doing that, you stab it in here, twist it real quick, and now there's a nice, beautiful bevel there. So if we put a bullet in there, it won't shave the side of the bullet off. So now go through and do that to all of them. So we'll do a random spot check. .89, interesting. Make sure we're zeroed. Barely off. Well, since that's different, let's go ahead and spot check one of the others that we did. Yeah, that's back down to 0.88. That was weird. And honestly, we could probably take that out for now, because then I can go all the way down to the bottom and still get my cases out. Yep. 0.885. So a spot check successful. A human hair is 0.03 of an inch, so if it's, you know, literally a human hair too long or too short, I'm really not that worried about it. Thinking about tumbling while I'm doing this, so like I said, once we're done depriming and trimming all of our cases, we'll throw them in a tumbler to clean them up and get them all pretty, hopefully deburr them. There's all kinds of schools of thought about what goes into the depriming and the tumbling. Now, there's a lot of people that they actually tumble first and then they deprime. If you want to do that, I suppose there's nothing wrong with it, especially if you're going to clean out the primer pockets by hand, which I've met some trashy bastards that don't even do that. They don't actually clean their primer pockets at all. And if you are going to do that, then like one of the progressive presses, you can deprime and reload without having to pause. If you're doing it with clean cases though, then you can still resize it if you want. As far as
the presses, we'll probably make a video later on the other two, because this turret press is kind of a semi-automatic. It's still only one bullet at a time, but you raise and lower it 4 times. You don't have to change the dies. Or it's called auto-indexing. The one on the left here is called a progressive press. So it will actually hold full 4 bullets on it, and every stroke of the handle is a finished round. And they make all kinds of auto feeders and stuff so that you don't have to do everything. You know, you don't have to put the bullet on it, or you don't have to put a new case in every time. The main thing is you just operate the handle and you quality check. And we may do videos about those. The one thing that this press can do that the other two will never be able to do is this. They trim the cases. You can't do that on a progressive press or an auto indexer, because the brass shavings can actually get into the press and stop it from working correctly. But on the other side of that, it auto indexes every time you lower it. So you would have to stroke the handle 4 times to trim 1 case. And that just sounds like a special kind of hell. So if you can only get 1 press, get this, I think it's called a breech lock is what they call it. And like I said, get the C style, or the O style press. Do not get the C, because where this one bolts to the table is steel. On the C press, I think it's called the Challenger press. I think it's aluminum, like it's cast aluminum. I literally had a stuck 5.56 round rip that press off the table. Like, it didn't break the screws, it broke the press where the screws held it to the table. So I just don't buy that press anymore. This one's not that much more expensive, and I've never broken one of these. If you don't have a bench to be able to mount a press, that is an option. They make stands for the other presses so that, you know, kind of like a tripod for a camera, that you can bolt a press to if you don't have a bench. But if you could only pick one press, I would go with the breech lock. And then the progressive, the auto indexing, they just make it go a little faster. You don't really need them. The one all the way to the far right is a shotgun press for making shotgun rounds. Okay, so everything's been prepared. We're ready for the next step. So this is a tumbler, vibrator, whatever you want to call it. So we open this bad boy up. Got a thumb screw and a washer. This bushing, sometimes it's attached to the lid, sometimes it's not. Depends on what model. Now the important thing here is we want to make sure that this one is tight, because that holds the bowl down to the stand, and then make sure our spacer is in place there. Because if that spacer's not in place, then that lid can crush down in there, and that's not a good thing. Warping the lid will cause leaks. And if that's loose, it can cause that bowl to start walking around or even jump off if it gets completely off there. So one thing to note, somehow I did find I picked up a steel case in my brass. I've heard it's possible to reload it. If it is, you have to have special equipment to do it. I don't have special equipment. So steel just gets tossed around here for lack of an alternative. So now this is where this is going to get really loud and no one's going to be able to hear a fucking word I'm saying. But you switch it on before you throw the brass in there, because that'll get it to circulate, and then you try to spread it out evenly. The other thoughts on tumbling is there's all kinds of opinions about how to do it, how long do you do it, what to use when you do it. Thought that one felt a little weird. The main thing about all of that is whatever's cheap, local, and works. I use corncob media, so dried and ground up corn cobs. I can go buy it in bulk here. Again, it's one of those things that's kind of expensive to ship because it's really heavy and it's really voluminous. But the material itself is cheap, so you're basically paying for shipping and nothing else, which is just kind of annoying. I think the second most common one is like crushed walnut shells. I don't think walnuts grow around here, so I can't get them locally. That means they're not cheap for me. If that's the route you want to go, more power to you. Even more people use fancier stuff like ceramic tiles or steel pins to tumble their brass, and I hear it works. And the main advantage to those is I guess they don't get dirty, or you can just wash them off when they do. When you're using corn cob or walnut shell media, then, or sand really, then when it gets dirty, you kind of just have to toss it because there's really nothing you can do about it. In the same vein, I know people that when they tumble, they'll add a polishing compound. I know people that swear against polishing compound. I have literally met people that don't clean their rounds at all. They'll go through all the steps of reloading and they don't own any kind of tumbler because they don't care what the rounds look like. They're really just there to be pretty. Or again, a lot of companies, because they're selling a product, they want their product to be as clean as possible. Tumbling is actually the last step for them. So they'll actually take fresh brass, whether they make it or buy it, they'll reload it through the whole process, and then they'll actually throw it in a tumbler last, and then they'll sell it. And it's because that is able to clean the entire outside of the shell. It makes them look really pretty, and that gives better perceived value, because people perceive cleaner, nicer looking things as being more expensive, or being of higher quality. And you'll need some manner of strainer. This is a purpose-built one. It's about the same diameter of the trash can, which works out pretty good. I don't know how much of that anybody heard or understood. I'm going to hope most of it. So now, this is the only part of this that I do recommend that you have really any kind of PPE. So the thing is, in most of this, you don't really need to worry about, like really anything. But remember, primers use lead salts to work. And we've cleaned the cases. So there are now lead salts in our tumbling medium. You need some kind of respiratory protection, because if not, you're going to breathe in a bunch of lead salts when we dump that out. And lead in the lungs is about the quickest way to get heavy metal poisoning. Touching a solid brick of lead is not that bad. Breathing powdered lead is. So I'm sure my audio will go to shit as soon as I put this on, but I gotta wear it for this step. Test my seal. Okay, that's good. So now, these should be ready to come out of there. This is the scenario where we remove the spacer and the center nut.
Luke, I am. No, I am your father. I'm okay with that. As you can see, a bunch of these are still filled with the media, so not a bad idea. Pour that back in there. Pour these back into here. Make the god-awful sound.
We've got our little jar here of powder, and then we've got our scale here to check. And the most important step is right now with it empty, we zero it out. The ball is set to 0, the scale is set to 0. You have to move this adjuster weight until your scale stays at 0. So we're zeroing it out with the weight of the beam. Right now it's set pretty good. Now, where you are in the US or where you are in the world, what temperature it is, that's all going to affect it. So always at the start of your reloading, zero this out. Now, we don't actually need the scale. Remember, we need 5.1. So the confusing part about this is you see these white lines, and you've got 3 of them. So there's a white line at 9, 0, and 1. We always take the measurement from the middle mark on this scale. So we can pop our lock out of this. We can move it down to about 5. We're going to start at 5.1, so we need the middle mark. And I put my thumb here for some tension to move. And you see those 3 white lines. We want to see them at 1. And then once 1 is in our middle mark, lock it with the button. So that puts us at 5.1 grains of powder. Now with that on there, we'll put it back on the balance. Of course, it will sit like that. Won't move at all, right? So with this, you only get one of these caps. You can buy as many bottles as you want. These bottles are open on the top, but if you turn this cap here, you can close it off and then remove it from your reloading press. And see, that closes it off so you can change the bottle with no spill. So it's easier to just change this whole lid, turn it up like this and take the lid off, than it is to swap this between bottles. But, do as you please. And then open it back up. We got that open. So at the top here, I like to tap this because this is our volume of powder in our scale. You can put your pan underneath that. We'll just make a royal mess in case things go horribly wrong here. And then you can move this downwards. That'll give you 1 charge of powder. Tap it to make sure all the powder's out. Now you can throw it on your scale to check the weight of it. That's just a little bit light. So if you move this thumb screw here, you can adjust your actual thing by moving it independently, tightening your thumb screw back down. So because I'm not going to use this charge, I'm going to dump it back in the jar. Up, tap to make sure it seats. Level that out. Dump my powder into it. I lost half my powder in the tray. Weigh that back out. So we're going to dump this out. Double check our reading. Okay, and that looks pretty level to me. So we're going to call that good. Now remember, for 45 ACP, that is all the powder we need. That's it. And then remember, close your extra powder, because if some accident happens, we do not want to make a bigger fire than we need to. We'll go ahead and throw our scale back on there. Turning our attention back to the press. Okay, so now we can go ahead and remove our quick change bushing by pushing this down and turning our fucking bushing. If it's a little too stiff, these tools come with your press. They give you just a little bit extra leverage, so a stuck die is not so stuck. You don't even need to unscrew it. You just give it a quarter turn and come out. Now we can put our seating die in here. Same thing. Find that gap, put it down in there, and then turn it so that it locks with this plunger. Now what we do is we come up with our handle. That's going to be a problem. We come up with our handle. Now we take a nickel. These aren't going away anytime soon. Put it on our shell holder. Full stroke. And then you screw in your seating die until it touches that. There we go. That's the proper space. Now we throw one of our clean shells and you can see we've got the whole usable volume. Throw it in there, bring it all the way to the top. Bring her back down. And now our test for our seating is take the bullet we're going to use. And you see how easily that fit in there? That's the perfect seating depth. If it sits on top of that, we need to open it more. If it sits way down in there, we need to open it less. Which you control by screwing and unscrewing your die. That is the perfect seating depth for us. Now while we're doing this, we're going to prime it. So you need to get your large priming tool. Open her up. God damn. Now you see all these little ridges? That's to control directions. So you could put your primers in this little slot here one by one. You could prime them off of the press. You can do whatever you want. But we have to have the primer in it before we prime it. So we're going to do 50 rounds because we're doing test batches here. So when we slide open our thing of primers, you'll notice there's 10 to a row. Well, we're doing 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So we'll do 30 primers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll cover these 5. Take our priming tool here, put it on top, and flip it over. So we need less than 2. So this batch we got lucky because all of the primers were the correct direction. So if you get one that's upside down like that, which isn't uncommon, but Jesus Christ, Winchester, good job. That's the first pack of primers I've ever got that were all facing the right way. So we take our 25 primers here, and by just gently shaking them, we can get all of them to face the correct direction. We lock that back closed so that doesn't give them enough room to flip back over. And then we shake them all so they get in the hopper. So these are all ready to go now. We can pop this in our little holder here. Preferably straight, you know. So now you put your shell in there all the way to the top. You can now take your primer lever, push this down. That puts a primer in here. Now there's 2 ways we can do this. You could either take your pan, flip this over, tap it, get your pan in line, flip it back over, tap your pan again. These come with a little tiny funnel that fits in this die. Come all the way to the bottom. Put our shell in. Prime it. Go all the way to the top. Now you have 2 options. Now you have 2 options here. You can either take your pan, put it under the scale, weigh out an ounce of powder, put it on your scale here to ensure that it is the correct level. In the ultimate example of always check what you're doing, I set this powder scale yesterday to exactly what we needed. Today, with a different temperature, a different humidity, it has been throwing me a wrong pour every time. So I just had to readjust it. So we stop this from swinging. Let our balance beam do its thing. It doesn't look perfectly lined up on camera, but it is perfectly lined up IRL. So we are going to take this pan of powder. We can then toss it down this funnel, tap it, make sure it all tap the funnel to make sure it all went through. And then when we pull down our ram, we have a shell full of powder, and the primer is flush with the bottom, right where it's supposed to be. So this is ready for a bullet. You can do this is once you've primed your case, like we discussed, the other thing you're going to do is once you've primed your case like we discussed, you can actually come over here to the powder measure, put the case against the bottom of it, and just pour directly into the shell. So we still have a perfectly charged case, and at any time you could pour this into the pan to check your weights, make sure that we got all of it out of there. And then you have this handy little funnel that if you put fully and seat the case into the funnel will work. So you can check any of your loads and load them that way, or put them in the pan and put it in the funnel, up to you. The main thing is this is a pass-through die on this reloading kit, which most of them aren't pass-throughs, like for rifles. So charging is a separate step from expanding. In pistols, we can get away with it. So you have your choice there. Put my next primer in. Forward and then down. Put in our next shell. Prime it. Check that it's flush. All the way to the top. And I almost prefer using the pan because that means that I'm using the press less. I mean, obviously, whatever you want to do, the world is your oyster, I suppose. So charged case, flush primer. We're going to do that for 5. So we've managed our first 5. Now for our next 5, remember, we're going to take the scale, put a thumb here for tension, push the release, move this over 1. So remember, there's those 3 white lines. We're going on the middle of all 3 of them. Line it up with 5.2. Push our lock back in. Make sure our marble's still at 0. So now that we've adjusted that, we adjust this. Tell it to give us a little bit more powder. And we weigh it out. Check it. See if it's what we want. That looks pretty good to me. So now we're going to load our 5.2s. Then we'll go 5.3, then 5.4, 5.5, 5.6. And that will be all of the powder charges that we're going to do today. Because remember, we are working up a load. We need to know how much powder to put in them. This is just a test. Okay, so now that all of our cases have been flared and or charged, we can take that die back out. If you have any extra powder on here, a can of keyboard cleaner works pretty well. Or compressed air if you have an air compressor. So we will take the blue die. This is our bullet expander. Toss it down in here. Now when we raise it up to the top, screw in the die until it touches the ram. Back the ram off. We will unscrew our seating portion here until we can start to see threads, which is its maximum expanded limit. So now take an empty case, raise it to the top, and now screw in your seating die until you feel pressure. Right there, I feel something, so we're going to stop. Now we take our bullet, nice and clean, fresh out of the box. Put it in our case, raise it to the top of the ram. And if it doesn't go pretty easy, something's wrong. So now when we take it out, 12730, well within our ability. So remember, this should always be screwed in till it contacts the ram. This is your seating bit, which is what you should adjust. Put our bullet in there. ram it, on to the next one. And again, you see where a progressive press pays off, because seating the bullet is its own step, or in the auto indexing, you just put your bullet on there and you keep going. You don't have to change the die. But in your progressive press, you put the bullet on there, or you can have a feeder automatically put your bullet on there. And again, it becomes an automatic. Every pull is a bullet, and you didn't have to do anything. Whereas we have to work in batches with a progressive press, every pull is another bullet. So, you know, depending on how much you shoot, how active you are, how much money you have, you will save a little bit of money reloading your own. And if you're a competition shooter, you can make more precise ammo than anything you could ever buy. Because not only can every bullet be exactly the same, but you can make every single bullet exactly match your gun. Now, I will remind you that for the average shooter, those numbers don't matter. You know, your bullet being 1/1000th of an inch shorter doesn't actually matter when you're talking about short range, like 100 yards. And so now that we've seated all of them, we go through and we put our crimp die, identified by the yellow bushing. So again, put that on there, it raises. So now what we do, we unscrew the knurled bit until we can finally see threads. Right there I can see the threads. We move the ram to the top, screw in the entire die until it touches our ram. Now we put a loaded bullet into the ram all the way to the top, and we screw in our top piece until we meet some resistance. So now that we know what it is, adjust it in until it touches our loaded round, pull it out. Now it's 1/2 turn for a light crimp, or 1 full turn for a heavy crimp. I'm going to do 3/4 of a turn. So we put the round in there, pull it out. Now you can see that little beveled edge that's on there. That beveled edge is our crimp. So this bullet should not be able to move, and it should be reasonably the same as when it went in there. Remember, shorter is always okay, longer is not. Measure this one going in, 126/30. Crimp it. .126/35. Almost exactly the same, but now we can see where that groove is all the way around. So we'll go through. Now, if you are precision shooting, you may not crimp, because that's an extra step that adds a little instability, and you know, every operation we add a little tolerance, so every bullet can be a little bit different. However, if you're not competitive shooting and actively keeping track of your ammunition and being extremely careful not to do something as stupid as drop your ammo, then you should crimp. Because while it adds a little bit of tolerance, which somebody shooting at 1,000 yards might be able to notice, if you're just doing this for target ammo, for range ammo, for really anything under 1,000 yards, then you don't really need to worry about it being uncrimped. Because the only thing that crimping does is it stops your bullet from being seated deeper, really. The idea of crimping is to stop the bullet from being seated either further or the bullet being pulled out. Which for a competitive shooter, they would probably make their ammo the night before. They would keep a close eye on it. They wouldn't throw it or bump around the case. So that's a little bit different. If you want to have the most accurate ammunition you could possibly have, you don't need to crimp it. However, for the average person, I would say you should crimp it. There's our end result. Crimped, ready to go bullets of a uniform size. We'll figure out which one of these charges fires the best, and we will make a large batch of that size. Whether it be 5.1 or out to 5.6.